The grave had no name on it, just a small wooden cross standing alone beneath the scorching desert sun at the edge of a forgotten town called Dry Creek. Every Sunday morning, an old man dressed in black walked slowly across the dusty cemetery carrying fresh white flowers in his trembling hands. He would kneel beside the grid silence for several minutes, then quietly leave, without speaking to anyone. For years, nobody knew whose grave it was, and nobody dared ask Dot because the old man was Samuel Grayson, the wealthiest man in 3 counties, owner of railroads, farms, banks, and half the businesses across the territory. People respected him. Some feared him, but no one truly knew him. Children in town often whispered stories about the lonely old millionaire who lived alone in the giant house above the hills. Some believed he was cold-hearted. Others claimed tragedy had turned him into a ghost long before death ever could. But every Sunday, without fail, Samuel visited that grave. Rain, snow, burning heat. Nothing stopped him. Then one autumn morning, a young journalist named Claire Bennett arrived in Dry Creek searching for a story. Claire worked for a struggling newspaper in Chicago and desperately needed something meaningful enough to save her career. When she heard rumors about the mysterious grave connected to the richest man in the West, curiosity immediately pulled her toward Dry Creek. At first, the townspeople warned her not to ask questions. Samuel Grayson hated reporters, but Claire was stubborn, and something about the sadness in those whispers told her this was more than a story about money. So, early Sunday morning, she quietly followed Samuel through the cemetery. The old man moved slowly, now leaning heavily on a cane, while carrying the same white flowers. Claire watched him kneel beside the grave with trembling hands. For several moments, he simply stared at the wooden cross. Then something unexpected happened. The old man began speaking softly. "I'm sorry it took me so long." Claire froze. His voice carried a pain so deep it almost felt wrong to hear it. "You deserve better from me," he whispered. The wind moved gently through the cemetery, while Samuel lowered his head. Claire accidentally stepped on a dry branch nearby. The crack echoed loudly. Samuel turned sharply. For a moment, anger flashed across his tired face. Then exhaustion replaced it. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked. Quietly, Claire hesitated before stepping forward. "I am sorry. I did not mean to intrude." Samuel stared at her notebook. Another reporter. "I came for a story," Claire admitted honestly. Samuel gave a bitter smile. "Then you came to the wrong grave." He slowly stood, preparing to leave, when Claire asked the question nobody else ever dared speak aloud. "Who's buried there?" Samuel stopped walking. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Then, finally, he answered, "The only person who ever truly loved me." Claire felt chills despite the warm morning air. Samuel looked toward the distant hills. "Come tomorrow evening if you still want your story." Then he walked away. The next night, Claire arrived at the enormous Grayson mansion overlooking the town. Inside, everything felt strangely empty despite the wealth surrounding it. Expensive paintings lined the walls. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly above polished floors. Yet the house carried no warmth. No laughter. No family. Just silence. Samuel sat near the fireplace holding a glass untouched in his hand. Claire noticed another framed photograph beside him, a young woman smiling brightly beneath a summer sky. "Who is she?" Claire asked gently. Samuel stared at the photograph. "For a very long time, her name was Eleanor, and once upon a time, she saved my life." Claire listened quietly while Samuel began telling the story he had buried for nearly 40 years. Back then, Samuel Grayson was not rich. He was a poor railroad worker, barely surviving from one paycheck to the next. He spent most nights gambling away money he did not have and drinking to escape the disappointment of his own failures. Then one winter evening during a snowstorm, he collapsed drunk beside a roadside, half frozen and ready to die. Everyone else walked past him, everyone except Eleanor. She was a school teacher returning home after visiting her sick mother. Despite the storm and danger, she dragged Samuel through deep snow to her tiny house near the edge of town. For 3 days, she cared for him, while fever nearly killed him. When Samuel finally woke fully conscious, Eleanor handed him hot soup and said words he never forgot. "You cannot hate yourself into becoming better." Claire watched emotion slowly fill the old man's eyes. Nobody had ever spoken to him with kindness before. Not real kindness. Samuel began visiting Eleanor every evening afterward. At first, he only wanted to thank her. Then slowly he fell in love. Eleanor believed in him even when he believed in nothing himself. She encouraged him to stop gambling. To work harder. To dream bigger. Years later, Samuel opened his first small freight company using money Eleanor secretly saved for him while teaching school. And against all odds, the business succeeded. Then another. Then another. Eventually, Samuel Grayson became one of the richest men in the territory. But somewhere along the way, success changed him, or perhaps revealed who he truly was becoming. Samuel became obsessed with wealth expansion and reputation. Long business trips kept him away for months. Important meetings mattered more than quiet evenings at home. Claire noticed his hands shaking slightly now, and Eleanor slowly became lonely. One evening, she begged Samuel to slow down. We already have enough, she told him. I do not care about the money. I just want my husband back. But Samuel refused to listen. He convinced himself he was building a better future for them both. The next year, Eleanor became seriously ill. Samuel was away in New York, closing the largest business deal of his life when the telegram arrived. Come home immediately. Your wife is dying. By the time Samuel returned, Eleanor could barely speak. He remembered kneeling beside her bed while tears streamed down his face. I'm here now, he told her desperately. Eleanor smiled weakly. I know. Those were the last words she ever heard. Samuel fell silent. The fire crackled softly between them. Claire almost forgot to breathe. After a long moment, she finally asked the question, resting heavily in the room. Why does her grave not have a name? Samuel stared into the flames. Because she spent her whole life making sure people remembered mine. And I spent mine forgetting hers. Tears filled Claire's eyes instantly. Samuel stood slowly and walked toward the window overlooking the dark town below. People think grief arrives like a storm, he said quietly. But real grief is quieter than that. It lives in empty chairs, silent hallways, forgotten conversations. And every morning you wake up realizing the person who loved you most is still gone. Claire looked around the enormous, lonely mansion. All this money and none of it mattered anymore. Samuel continued softly. Do you know the cruelest part? Claire shook her head. I would trade every dollar I owned for one more ordinary evening with her. One more dinner. One more walk. One more chance to choose her before work. The room fell silent again. Then Samuel reached into his coat pocket and handed Claire a folded letter yellowed with age. Eleanor wrote this before she died, he said. I have never shown it to anyone. Claire carefully opened the fragile paper. Inside, delicate handwriting covered the page. My dearest Samuel, if you're reading this, then it means I could not stay beside you long enough to remind you of something important. Success is a strange thing. People spend their whole lives chasing more while slowly losing what matters most. You once asked why I loved you when you had nothing. The answer was simple. Because when we were poor, you still had time to laugh with me, time to sit beneath the stars. Time to hold my hand during storms. Do not spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for mistakes we both know cannot be changed. Instead, promise me something. When people speak about Samuel Grayson, after you are gone, do not let them remember only your wealth. Let them remember your kindness too. Claire finished reading with tears falling silently down her face. Samuel smiled sadly. I failed her for many years, but I have been trying to honor that promise ever since. The next morning, Claire discovered something extraordinary. Nearly every orphanage, school, and hospital across the territory had been secretly funded by Samuel Grayson for decades. Anonymous donations, scholarships, food programs, medical care for poor families. Millions. Quietly given away without public attention. Why keep it secret? Claire asked later. Samuel looked toward Eleanor's grave beneath the setting sun. Because kindness should sound like love, not applause. A week later, Samuel Grayson passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news spread quickly across the country. Newspapers wrote endlessly about his fortune, his businesses, and his success. But Claire wrote a different story. Not about the millionaire, about the lonely husband who spent 40 years carrying flowers to the woman he loved. Too late. Her article spread everywhere. And for the first time, people learned the truth about the nameless grave in Dry Creek. Months later, townspeople gathered quietly in the cemetery as workers replaced the old wooden cross with a beautiful white stone. Carved into it were simple words. Eleanor Grayson, she taught a broken man how to love. Beside her grave, another stone appeared soon afterward. Samuel Grayson, he spent the rest of his life trying to deserve her.